In 1953, on a quiet Sunday morning in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, grocery store owner Harold Jacobson made what seemed like a simple decision. He unlocked his doors to serve customers who needed last-minute items for their Sunday family dinners. Within an hour, he was arrested, handcuffed, and hauled before a judge for violating Iowa's blue laws, statutes that had governed American life for over 3 centuries. His crime? Selling groceries on the Lord's Day. Jacobson couldn't have known that his arrest would mark the beginning of the end for a tradition that had shaped American society since the first colonists stepped foot in Virginia. The Sunday he knew, a day of church, family dinners around polished tables, and mandatory rest, was about to disappear forever. What happened next would transform American culture in ways that still reverberate today. The story of how Sunday died in America is really 3 stories. The death of forced faith, the collapse of family time, and the end of rest as a sacred right. It's a tale of liberation for some, profound loss for others, and unintended consequences for all. The roots of American Sunday stretch back to 1610, when the Virginia colony passed the first blue laws in what would become the United States. These weren't quaint suggestions. They carried the force of law and the threat of imprisonment. The earliest laws in North America addressing Sunday activities and public behavior were enacted in the Jamestown colony in 1619 by the First General Assembly of Virginia, with mandates requiring attendance by all colonists at both morning and afternoon worship services on Sundays. By the 1800s, these laws had evolved into an intricate web of restrictions that governed nearly every aspect of American life. Boxing, wrestling, horse racing, hunting, bingo, billiards, movie theaters, bowling, card playing, cockfighting, dancing, gaming, polo, and raffles were among the banned recreational pursuits on Sunday. In some states, you couldn't even serve legal papers or buy a newspaper. The intent was crystal clear. Sunday belonged to God, family, and rest in that exact order. But by the 1960s, cracks in the Sunday fortress were becoming impossible to ignore. The civil rights movement was challenging all forms of government-imposed morality. Women were entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers. Suburbanization meant families lived farther from extended relatives. Television was reshaping home life. And a new generation was questioning why the government should dictate their day of rest. The legal death blow came in 1961, when the Supreme Court heard 4 separate challenges to blue laws in a single year. In McGowan v. Maryland, employees of a large department store were fined for selling merchandise, including floor wax and toys, on Sunday in violation of state law. The court's ruling was both a victory and a funeral. While they upheld the constitutionality of Sunday laws, they stripped away their religious justification, ruling they were permissible only as secular measures to provide workers a day of rest. This legal sleight of hand, keeping Sunday laws while removing their spiritual foundation, proved to be the beginning of their end. If Sunday was just another day off, why couldn't businesses operate? Why couldn't people shop? Why couldn't they decide for themselves how to spend their time? The floodgates opened, state by state, restriction by restriction. The elaborate architecture of American Sunday began to crumble. Virginia historically had blue laws prohibiting all Sunday labor or business from 1610 to 1960, when the law was amended to allow household and other necessary work. By 1988, the Supreme Court of Virginia ruled that the law was unconstitutional, finally ending almost 400 years of blue laws. But the most dramatic change wasn't in the law books. It was in American living rooms and around American dinner tables. For generations, Sunday dinner had been as immutable as the sunrise. According to the Washington Post, Sunday dinner was a tradition, a real Sabbath away from the worries of the work week, a place with lace and folded napkins, surrounded by family. These weren't casual affairs. They were elaborate productions that could take all morning to prepare, involved multiple generations, and stretched for hours. The ritual was deeply embedded in American culture. Families would return from church, women would spend hours in the kitchen preparing roasts and side dishes, and the entire extended family would gather around tables set with the good china. From the Victorian era through the 1950s, this idealistic notion of family unity at the dining table was impressed upon Americans. Children learned table manners, family stories were passed down, and bonds were strengthened over shared meals. But by the 1970s and 80s, this tradition was under siege from multiple directions. More women were working outside the home, making elaborate Sunday meal preparation increasingly difficult. Families were becoming more geographically dispersed. Divorce rates were climbing, breaking up the extended family networks that made large Sunday gatherings possible. The invention of the crock-pot in the 1970s actually represented both an attempt to preserve Sunday dinner traditions and an acknowledgement that they were failing. Crock-pots became the perfect way to conveniently cook food. More women were working, and this appliance gave women the ability to put food in the slow cooker and let it cook. Before going to church, someone can fill a crock-pot with all the ingredients for dinner and let it cook all day. Welcome to Professor Archive, where we dig deep into the stories that shaped our world. Before we continue with the collapse of American Sunday traditions, I'm curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Are you perhaps watching this on a Sunday? Drop a comment and let me know. If you're enjoying these deep dives into cultural history, consider leaving a super thanks. It really helps us continue bringing you these thoroughly researched stories. The statistics paint a sobering picture of what we've lost. Only 38% of Gen Zers who are now adults report that their family ate together regularly growing up, compared to far higher rates among baby boomers. And this isn't just a generational shift, it's become a class divide. Only 38% of younger Americans without a college education were raised in homes that shared meals every day. In contrast, more than 6 in 10, 61% younger Americans with a postgraduate education say their family ate together regularly. The data reveals a stunning transformation. What was once a universal American experience has become a privilege of the educated and affluent. But the death of Sunday dinner was just one part of a larger spiritual earthquake that was reshaping American society. While families were struggling to maintain their traditional Sunday gatherings, an even more fundamental shift was occurring in American religious life. The numbers tell an extraordinary story of decline. Since peaking in 1960, the share of American adults attending any religious service in a typical week has fallen from 50% to about 35%, while the share claimed as members by any religious body has fallen from over 75% to about 62%. More recently, on any given weekend, about 3 in 10 U.S. adults attend religious services, down from 42% 2 decades ago. This represents one of the most dramatic cultural shifts in American history. For the first time since the colonial era, regular church attendance has become a minority behavior. Only 20% of Americans attend church every week, down from 32% in 2000. Even more striking, 57% of Americans are seldom or never in religious service attendance. The decline has been particularly steep among certain denominations. Between 2000 and 2015, the Presbyterian Church USA, the Episcopal Church, and the United Church of Christ lost 40% of their members. Traditional Protestant denominations that once formed the backbone of American religious life found themselves hemorrhaging members, many of whom simply stopped attending any church at all. But it wasn't just that people were attending church less. The entire experience of American Sunday was changing. The Sunday evening service, once a cornerstone of American religious life, became one of the first casualties. In recent history, there has been a sharp decline in those who attend Sunday evening services. Even in strong and thriving churches, and to the dismay of church leaders, Sunday night attendance numbers continue to be dismal. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated trends that had been building for decades. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, some congregations have discontinued the Sunday night service entirely. What had once been a second anchor point in the American Sunday, morning worship followed by family dinner, then evening service, simply vanished from most American communities. Perhaps most telling of all, the very concept of the Sabbath was being reimagined. Where Sunday had once been legally protected as a day of rest and worship, it was increasingly becoming just another day for commerce and entertainment. According to a recent survey by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 40% of Americans socialize on Sundays, but twice as many, 8 out of 10, sit back and watch TV, an average of 4 hours. 1 in 4 attends religious services, and about that same number goes shopping. The transformation was complete. Sunday had become a day for consumption rather than contemplation, for entertainment rather than enlightenment, for shopping rather than Sabbath. The final pillar of traditional Sunday, rest, faced its own unique challenges in the transformation of American society. The concept of a guaranteed day of rest, protected by law and supported by social norms, began to erode as the service economy grew and consumer expectations shifted. The retail revolution played a crucial role in this transformation. As shopping became a primary form of recreation and entertainment, the pressure to keep stores open 7 days a week intensified. When Sunday morning first went on the air in 1979, in many parts of the country it was impossible to shop on Sundays. Stores were required to be closed. But by the 1990s, Sunday shopping had become not just legal, but expected. The few holdouts faced enormous economic pressure. In 1980, Bergen County voters turned down a referendum to abolish the Sunday shopping prohibition. Most recently, in November 1993, a county-wide referendum to abolish the Sunday sales prohibition was defeated by a vote of 2-1. Bergen County, New Jersey, remains one of the last places in America where Sunday shopping restrictions still exist, and even there, they cover only specific types of goods. The economic argument for Sunday shopping proved irresistible. Retailers discovered that Sunday could be one of their most profitable days. Families with 2 working parents found weekends their only opportunity for major shopping. The convenience of 7-day-a-week commerce began to seem not just desirable, but necessary. This shift had profound implications for American workers. While the original justification for eliminating blue laws was often framed in terms of individual freedom and economic opportunity, the reality was more complex. Service workers, disproportionately lower-income Americans, found themselves increasingly required to work on Sundays. The day of rest became a luxury that many working Americans could no longer afford. The restaurant industry exemplified this transformation. Sunday brunch became a major business, leading to the rise of brunch culture that explicitly replaced traditional Sunday dinner. In New York, alcohol can start being served on Sundays at 10 a.m., thanks to the introduction of the brunch bill in 2016. The leisurely, family-centered Sunday meal was replaced by a commercialized dining experience that prioritized mimosas over meaningful conversation. Sports, too, played a crucial role in reshaping Sunday. Professional football became a weekly ritual in America, with the Super Bowl becoming an odd combination of religion, striptease show, and football that was bigger than football and represented an American civil religion. Sunday afternoon became less about family time and more about game time, less about community gathering and more about televised entertainment. The transformation accelerated with the rise of 24/7 consumer culture. Online shopping meant that even when physical stores were closed, commerce never stopped. Social media created new forms of Sunday entertainment and distraction. The gig economy meant that more Americans were working irregular schedules that didn't respect traditional boundaries between work and rest. What's particularly striking about this transformation is how quickly it occurred and how completely it swept across American society. Cultural changes that might have taken generations in previous eras happened within a few decades. The Sunday that existed in 1960 would be virtually unrecognizable to many Americans today. But perhaps the most significant change was in how Americans conceptualized rest itself. The traditional Sabbath wasn't just about not working, it was about intentional rest, reflection, and renewal. It was time set aside for activities that nourished the soul rather than just entertained the mind. It was communal rather than individual, contemplative rather than consumptive. The modern Sunday, by contrast, often became another day for productivity, entertainment, and consumption. Rest became something you earned rather than something you were entitled to. Leisure became commodified rather than sacred. The rhythm of work and rest that had structured human societies for millennia was replaced by the constant availability demanded by modern consumer culture. Some Americans adapted by creating their own versions of Sabbath rest, perhaps Saturday hiking trips or Sunday morning yoga classes. Others found meaning in new forms of community gathering, from sports bars to farmers markets. But for many, the loss of a collective day of rest represented a genuine cultural impoverishment, a loss of rhythm and meaning that left them feeling perpetually rushed and never fully renewed. The consequences of these changes extend far beyond individual families or communities. The death of Sunday traditions represents the collapse of what sociologists call social capital, the networks of relationships that help societies function effectively. Research has consistently shown the benefits of family meals. A recent Harvard study showed that 80% of teenagers claim family dinner is the time they are most likely to converse with their parents. Children who regularly eat with their families show better academic performance, lower rates of substance abuse, and stronger emotional development. Family meals provide parents the opportunity to model appropriate behavior, communicate values, and establish and reinforce cultural traditions. The decline of church attendance has implications that extend far beyond religious belief. Churches historically served as crucial community institutions, providing not just spiritual guidance but social services, community connections, and civic engagement opportunities. Millennials are reportedly turned off by high-profile church leadership scandals and increasing political polarization in many American congregations, causing many to lose trust in churches and religious institutions altogether. The loss of guaranteed rest has contributed to what researchers call time poverty. The sense that despite labor-saving technologies, Americans feel increasingly pressed for time. Without a collective day of rest, the boundary between work and personal life has become increasingly blurred. The mental health implications of this shift are still being understood, but early research suggests connections to increased anxiety, depression, and social isolation. Perhaps most concerning is the way these changes have become stratified by class and education. Higher-income families are more likely to maintain family meal traditions, attend religious services regularly, and have the flexibility to create their own Sabbath rest. Lower-income families, particularly those working in service industries, often lack these opportunities. What were once universal American experiences have become markers of privilege. The generational divide is equally stark. The family dinner was once a ubiquitous feature of American life, an experience shared across cultural, religious, and class lines, but it has disappeared in many households. Only 38% of Gen Zers who are now adults report that their family ate together regularly growing up. But the story doesn't end with decline and loss. Across America, individuals, families, and communities are working to recreate meaningful traditions adapted to modern life. Some are succeeding in ways that previous generations might not have imagined. The farm-to-table movement has brought new intentionality to food and family meals. Community gardens create new forms of connection to the land and to neighbors. Some families have instituted device-free Sundays or created new rituals around outdoor activities or volunteer work. Religious communities are adapting as well. Pentecostal and charismatic religious traditions are the fastest growing in the world and have been for the past several years. In the United States, non-denominational churches have seen significant growth over the last decade, with over 4,000 new non-denominational churches opened since 2010. Some communities are experimenting with secular versions of Sabbath rest. Portland, Oregon has explored car-free Sundays in certain neighborhoods. Some tech companies have instituted no-email weekends policies. Urban farming projects create new forms of community connection and seasonal rhythm. The COVID-19 pandemic, despite its many challenges, also created unexpected opportunities for families to rediscover home-centered traditions. In 2021, half of parents, 50%, said their family had home-cooked meals more often since the start of the pandemic. Some families used lockdown time to establish new meal traditions or to teach children cooking skills that had been lost. There are also signs that younger generations, despite growing up with less structured Sunday traditions, are hungry for the connections and rhythms that those traditions provided. 84% of adults wish they could share a meal with loved ones more often. Millennials make up the largest surge in returns to church as the pandemic has ended, with 39% of millennials reporting attending church weekly, up from 21% in 2019. The challenge for contemporary Americans is creating new traditions that provide the benefits of the old: community, connection, rest, and meaning, while fitting the realities of modern life. This might mean Sunday brunch instead of Sunday dinner, hiking groups instead of church services, or family game nights instead of formal mealtimes. What's clear is that the human needs that Sunday traditions addressed haven't disappeared. The need for community, for regular rest, for meaningful connection with family, for time to reflect and renew, these are as strong as ever. The question is whether Americans can create new forms and institutions to meet these needs, or whether the loss of traditional Sunday will leave a permanent void in American social life. The death of Sunday traditions in America represents more than just the end of specific practices. It marks a fundamental shift in how Americans understand community, rest, and the rhythm of life itself. What died with the American Sunday was not just church attendance or family dinners, but a shared understanding of time as something sacred rather than merely productive. In 1953, when Harold Jacobson was arrested for selling groceries on Sunday, he was challenging a system that prioritized collective rest over individual convenience, community tradition over consumer choice, spiritual rhythm over economic efficiency. The world that emerged from that challenge gave Americans unprecedented freedom to choose how to spend their time, but it also left many feeling unmoored, disconnected, and perpetually busy. Perhaps the real tragedy is not that the old Sunday died, but that Americans haven't yet created something equally meaningful to replace it. The challenge for future generations will be finding ways to reclaim the benefits of Sabbath, community, rest, and renewal in forms that fit contemporary life. The story of Sunday's death in America is ultimately a story about what societies choose to value and protect. It's about the tension between individual freedom and collective well-being, between economic efficiency and human flourishing, between the demands of commerce and the needs of the soul. As Americans continue to grapple with rising rates of loneliness, anxiety, and social fragmentation, the lessons of Sunday's disappearance become increasingly relevant. The question isn't whether we can resurrect the Sunday of 1953. That world is gone forever. The question is whether we can create new traditions that serve the same essential human needs in ways that fit the world we actually live in. The death of American Sunday traditions represents both a loss and an opportunity, a chance to consciously choose what kind of rhythm and meaning we want in our collective life, rather than simply letting those choices be made for us by the demands of commerce and convenience. In that choice lies perhaps the most important cultural challenge of our time. What are your thoughts on this transformation? Do you remember Sunday traditions from your childhood that no longer exist? What new traditions has your family created to fill the void? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this deep dive into American cultural history resonated with you, Don't forget to subscribe to Professor Archive for more stories about how we became who we are today.